On a cracked sidewalk in Los Angeles, two twins stood quietly, their only toy, a faded red car, placed between them with a small cardboard sign that read $20 for sale. They weren't shouting or begging, just standing there with a quiet need in their eyes that went unnoticed by the bustling city. That is, until one man, Keanu Reeves, paused across the street, drawn by something he couldn't quite explain. What he discovered was more than a simple sale. It was a hidden cry for help, a story of struggle, and a truth that would change everything. The late afternoon sun bathed Los Angeles in a golden glow, the air still damp from a recent rain. Puddles reflected the city like shattered mirrors, catching the light of passing cars and neon signs. Traffic moved slowly, horns echoing faintly between towering buildings. Outside a sleek toy store, its glass windows gleaming with displays of shiny robots, fire trucks, and propeller planes, the twins stood out like shadows from another world. They were about 10 years old, skinny, with worn-out backpacks slung over their shoulders. Their clothes were clean but faded, the kind of clean that comes from effort, not abundance. One boy, the quieter of the two, stared at the toy car on the ground, his fingers gripping his backpack strap. The other, more alert, scanned the street, his eyes darting to every passerby. The toy car, which they called Turbo, was old, its red plastic dulled by time. One wheel was held together with kitchen tape, and the cardboard sign taped to its hood was scrawled in uneven black marker. Neither boy spoke much. The quieter one, Ethan, kept his head down, a faint bruise visible on his inner arm, barely noticeable unless you looked closely. The other, Lucas, stood taller, his shoulders squared, always watching. "Keep your eyes out," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. "I am," Lucas replied, not turning his head. "Do you think anyone will stop?" Ethan asked, his voice small. "They have to. We need $20, Lucas said firmly. Ethan glanced at the bruise on his arm, then back at the car. "If we get the money, will he let us back in?" he asked. Lucas didn't answer right away, his jaw tightening. "I don't know. Maybe he won't yell," he said finally. They fell silent, the weight of their words hanging in the air. The toy store's windows glowed, casting a warm light over rows of pristine toys. Remote-controlled drones, blinking fire engines, action figures in perfect boxes. But Turbo, sitting on the damp sidewalk, belonged to a different life. It wasn't shiny or new, but it was theirs, cleaned with care, polished with whatever they could find to make it look presentable. "Remember when we got Turbo?" Ethan asked softly, his eyes fixed on the car. Lucas nodded, a faint smile breaking through. "Christmas. Mom stayed up all night building a track on the living room carpet. We raced it till the wheel broke, and she fixed it with that tape." He chuckled, but it faded quickly. "And now we're selling him." Ethan's fingers brushed the car's hood. "Turbo," he murmured, like he was talking to a friend. "Just a little longer, okay?" Minutes passed. People hurried by, businessmen in suits, families with shopping bags, teenagers on phones. Some glanced at the boys, but nobody stopped. "Maybe we should have written $10, Lucas said, frustration creeping into his voice. $10 won't cover it, Ethan replied. "Mom always said to value what you love, but we're selling him anyway." Lucas crouched, adjusting the sign, wiping an imaginary speck of dirt from Turbo's hood with his sleeve. He looked across the street to an old apartment building, its paint peeling, balconies rusted, windows dark except for one faint light. His jaw clenched. "Is he up there?" he asked. "Don't know," Ethan said. "Don't let him see us." "Pretend we're selling for candy," Lucas said. "But we're not," Ethan whispered. "Pretend anyway." A woman in a sharp blazer passed, glancing away. A man with a briefcase didn't even notice. A little girl stared at the boys, but her mom tugged her along. "They never stop," Ethan said, his voice heavy. "Nope. Even with the sign," Lucas agreed. "Then why'd we make it?" Ethan asked. "For someone who'll see," Lucas said, his eyes scanning the crowd. Ethan lowered his head. "I hope someone sees." Across the street, Keanu Reeves stepped out of a small cafe, a coffee cup in his hand. He wore dark jeans, a black jacket, and worn sneakers, his hair loose and a little messy. He wasn't in a rush, just walking, blending into the city's rhythm. Then his eyes caught the boys, their car, their sign. He stopped at the crosswalk, something pulling at him. The scene wasn't loud or dramatic, but it wasn't right either. The boys stood too still, their faces too serious for kids their age. It wasn't peace in their posture, it was restraint, like they were holding something heavy inside. Keanu watched for a long moment, his coffee cooling in his hand. The light changed, and he stepped into the street, drawn to them by a feeling he couldn't name. Turbo was just a cheap toy, but it carried a weight Keanu could feel in his chest. He approached slowly, careful not to startle them. Lucas saw him coming and stiffened, his eyes flickering as if deciding whether to run. Keanu stopped a few steps away, keeping his distance. "Is this car really for sale?" he asked, nodding at Turbo. Lucas glanced at the car. "Yeah, $20. Keanu raised an eyebrow, smiling gently. "Looks like it's got some stories." Ethan shrugged, eyes on the sidewalk. "It's just old now." Keanu knelt beside Turbo, running his fingers over the faded hood. The wheels wobbled, but the plastic was clean, polished with care, maybe with soap or oil to make it look better. "You guys cleaned it up, didn't you?" he said. Ethan nodded, still looking down. "It was dusty." "What's his name?" Keanu asked. The boys exchanged a glance, unsure if they should answer. "Turbo," Lucas said finally. "That's a good name," Keanu said, his smile warm. The boys didn't smile back. He pulled out his wallet and took out a crisp $20 bill. "All right, I'll take him." They hesitated, then Lucas took the money, his fingers trembling slightly. Ethan carefully peeled the sign off Turbo's hood, trying not to rip it. Keanu lifted the card gently, holding it like it mattered. "You sure you want to let him go?" he asked. Ethan looked away, his throat tight. Lucas nodded. "We need to." Keanu heard something in those words, not just wanting money, but needing it, like it was life or death. "Saving up for something fun? Like a game console or a school trip?" he asked, keeping his tone light. Lucas's voice softened. "Kind of." Ethan shifted, adjusting his backpack, his voice barely a whisper. "Just don't tell our stepdad." Keanu's expression didn't change, but something tightened in his chest. He saw the bruise on Ethan's arm again, clearer now in the fading light. "I won't say a word," he promised. The boys nodded, their faces still serious. Keanu stood there, the silence thick, like they were all holding their breath. He wanted to ask more, but the moment felt too fragile. He turned to leave, Turbo in his hands. The boys grabbed their backpacks and glanced at the apartment building across the street, its dim light flickering behind a torn curtain. They walked off quietly, their steps quick and careful. Keanu took a few steps, then noticed something on the wet sidewalk, a folded piece of paper, fallen from one of their backpacks. He picked it up, unfolding it carefully. It was a handwritten prescription, slightly torn, the ink smudged from the rain. Red pen across the top read urgent, with instructions to go to a hospital if symptoms continued. It was dated 2 weeks ago, already expired. The name on it was a woman's, Sarah Miller. Keanu didn't know her, but the paper felt like a warning, a piece of a puzzle he hadn't meant to find. He slipped it into his jacket pocket and looked down the street. The boys had turned a corner, their small figures vanishing behind parked cars. Keanu followed, moving quietly, his years of navigating busy film sets and crowded streets making him blend into the background. He wasn't sneaking, but he wasn't obvious either. Rounding the corner, he saw the boys walking ahead, heads down, not talking, their bodies leaning forward like they wanted to disappear into their own shadows. They passed a row of rundown shops, a liquor store with a flickering neon sign, a boarded-up laundromat, a pawn shop with bars on its windows and old TVs stacked inside like forgotten memories. Keanu stayed back, watching. The boys didn't beg or speak to anyone, just kept walking, their steps deliberate, like they'd done this 1,000 times. The neighborhood changed as they walked. Smooth sidewalks turned to cracked concrete, potholes scattered like scars across the street. Windows had bars, walls were covered in graffiti, and streetlights buzzed, casting long, cold shadows. A man on a bench glanced at the boys but didn't move. A woman pushing a cart full of bags looked away. Nobody seemed surprised to see 2 kids wandering alone, but Keanu felt it. They didn't belong here. They were too careful, too quiet, carrying a weight no kid should carry. With every step, that weight pressed harder on Keanu's chest. The boys turned into a narrow alley between 2 buildings, the walls stained with grime. Keanu slowed, waited, then peeked around the corner. The twins were climbing a rickety metal staircase on the side of an old apartment complex, 3 stories tall, its paint peeling, a stained mattress leaning against a dumpster below. They moved carefully, avoiding the middle of each step so the metal wouldn't creak. Halfway up, Lucas paused, looking at a second-floor window with a torn curtain and a dim light glowing behind it. He hesitated, then kept climbing. Keanu's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, his boots soft on the damp alley floor. From the street, he heard voices through the open window. A man's voice slurring, then loud, angry. Something heavy hit the floor, glass maybe. "You sold what?" the voice shouted, sharp and cruel. Keanu flinched, the sound hitting him like a physical blow. He stepped into the shadows, barely breathing. The curtain shifted, and a large, unsteady shadow appeared, holding a bottle, slamming a hand against the wall. The man was drunk and raged out of control. Then came a softer sound, small and broken, one of the boys' voices. "I'm sorry. We just wanted to help." Keanu's grip on Turbo tightened, his knuckles white. His other hand touched the prescription in his pocket. He knew this scene. Kids carrying a burden too big for them, hiding pain to protect someone else. He stepped closer, scanning the building. Trash piled up under a grated window, the air thick with the smell of urine and old oil. A car revved in the distance, its sound fading fast. Another thud came from the window, like a drawer slamming, or something worse. Keanu remembered his sister's words. When kids lie to protect someone, the danger's real. The boys had lied, not for themselves, but for someone sick, someone hurting. He walked to the rusty stairwell, its steps creaking under his weight. He stopped, looking back at the empty street. Nobody else was coming. Nobody else had seen the paper or heard the yells. It was just him, Turbo in his hand, still warm from the boy's touch. It wasn't just a toy, it was their lifeboat, the last thing they could give up. Another voice cut through the air, deep and angry. "You think you're smarter than me, selling that crap behind my back?" Then silence, heavy and wrong. Keanu climbed the stairs, steady and calm. He wasn't here as an actor or a celebrity, just a man who couldn't walk away. At the second floor, he stopped at a cracked door, the number 204 barely visible. Inside, he heard heavy breathing, pacing, then a harsh, wet cough, a woman's. He knocked, the sound sharp in the quiet. The air felt cold, tense. A small eye peeked through the door crack. Ethan, pale, his bruise darker under the harsh light. He stared, silent. "Hey, it's me from the toy store," Keanu said softly. Ethan hesitated, then unlatched the chain and opened the door. The apartment smelled of damp laundry, alcohol, and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. A yellow bulb flickered above a narrow hallway, the carpet stained and worn. A small table held a stack of unopened envelopes, covered in dust. Keanu heard the coughing again, louder now, coming from a back room. He followed Ethan, stepping carefully into a dim living room. There, on a worn mattress in the corner, lay a woman, maybe in her mid-30s. Her skin was pale, her lips dry, her breathing shallow. A bowl of cold soup sat untouched beside her, next to a plastic cup of water trembling in her shaky hand. She looked up as Keanu entered, trying to sit. "Who?" she whispered, her voice weak. Ethan answered. "He's the man who bought Turbo." The woman, Sarah, tried to smile, but it broke into a cough, sharp and painful. "I told them not to bother anyone," she said, her voice barely there. Keanu knelt beside her, his presence gentle, unthreatening. "They didn't bother me. They impressed me," he said. She coughed again, turning her face to the wall, the sound tearing through the room. On a nightstand were pill bottles, one empty, another tipped over, none new. From the kitchen, a bottle shattered, and the man's voice roared again, slurred and angry. Keanu glanced at Ethan, then pulled out his phone, already dialing. He wouldn't let them stay here another night. Keanu's car sped through the city, the night blurring past the windows. In the back seat, Ethan and Lucas sat close, each holding one of their mother's hands. Sarah was curled between them, her breathing weak, her face pale under the car's overhead light. Keanu drove in silence, letting the GPS's cold, robotic voice guide them to the nearest ER. At the hospital, he helped lift Sarah into a wheelchair, her body light and fragile. The boys stayed close, their small hands gripping her sleeves as a nurse rushed them inside. Within minutes, Sarah was behind curtains, and the boys sat on a hard plastic bench in the hallway. Keanu sat beside them, hands clasped, elbows on his knees. Ethan whispered, "Will she be okay?" Keanu turned to him, his voice steady. "The doctors are doing everything they can. You got her here just in time." Ethan nodded, but his eyes were unsure. Lucas stared at the floor, then spoke, his voice low. "She got sick a while ago. She kept coughing, then stopped eating." Keanu leaned closer. "Why didn't you ask for help sooner?" Ethan's voice cracked. "He said if we told anyone, they'd take us away from her." Keanu looked at them, his heart heavy. "What would have happened if you did nothing?" They didn't answer, but the silence was loud enough. A doctor appeared, her eyes tired but kind. "She's stable for now, but her lungs are inflamed, advanced pneumonia, untreated for weeks. She's also severely anemic." Ethan buried his face in his hands. Keanu stood, his voice firm. What happens next? We'll admit her tonight, start oxygen and 4 antibiotics, the doctor said. But she can't go back to that apartment. She needs rest, safety, a clean space. Keanu nodded. She won't go back. In the dim hospital waiting area, Keanu bought the boys hot chocolate from a vending machine. They sat on either side of him, small hands wrapped around warm paper cups. Lucas spoke first, his voice clearer now. We sold Turbo because our stepdad spent all the money on beer. He drinks every night, yells, throws stuff, sometimes forgets we're there. Ethan added, we just wanted to help Mom. Keanu listened, letting their words settle. I lost my mom young too, he said softly. My dad wasn't around much. I know what it's like to grow up fast. The boys looked at him, their eyes wide. You do? Lucas asked. Keanu nodded. That's why I'm still here. Ethan blinked, his voice small. We didn't think anyone would help. Everyone just walks past. Keanu's hand tightened on his cup. Not everyone. Not me. A nurse stepped in. She's asking for her boys. Keanu looked at them and whispered, let's go remind her she's not alone. 3 days later, the air felt different. No hospital bleach, no mold or alcohol, just fresh paint and warm linens. Keanu stood in the small yard of an emergency shelter, watching Ethan and Lucas run through garden paths, their laughter new and fragile. Inside, Sarah sat upright in bed, still weak but breathing easier, color returning to her cheeks. The shelter was simple, shared rooms, meals cooked in turns. But it was safe, and that was everything. The program director, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, stood beside Keanu. We've had cases like this before, but it's rare someone like you steps in, she said. Keanu shook his head. I just saw 2 kids selling a toy car. The rest just followed. She smiled. Sometimes that's all it takes. That afternoon, Keanu brought a gift. He opened his car trunk and pulled out Turbo, now polished, its wheels fixed. The boys froze. You kept him? Ethan asked, his voice soft. I said I'd take care of him, Keanu said, placing the car on the grass. The twins crouched, touching it like it was treasure. We thought you forgot, Lucas said. I never forget what matters, Keanu replied. Lucas looked up, his eyes bright. One day we'll give him to another kid, like you gave him back to us. Keanu smiled, a promise planted. That night, the twins sat on their new beds, Sarah resting across the hall. No yelling, no fear, just quiet. Ethan whispered, will this last? Lucas paused. I don't know, but I think he means it. Keanu, in the hallway, overheard but didn't interrupt, letting the moment breathe. The next morning, Keanu's phone rang. Mr. Reeves, it's Carla from the outreach team. You asked about their case file. There's more to this story. Keanu stood in the shelter's yard, watching the boys play with Turbo. Tell me, he said, his eyes narrowing. In a quiet office filled with case folders and cardboard boxes, Carla pushed a file toward him. Sarah reached out months ago multiple times, requests for medical help, housing, safety. All ignored. She was on a waiting list, but nobody followed up. Keanu's jaw clenched. Ignored. Carla nodded. She sent a handwritten letter, even attached photos of her boys. Keanu flipped through the file, finding a picture of Ethan and Lucas, younger, smiling brightly. She was trying, Carla said. Nobody listened. Keanu felt their pain like it was his own, a memory of his own childhood flickering, alone, unseen. And the stepfather? He asked. Carla sighed. Prior arrest for domestic battery, never prosecuted. Keanu stood, his voice firm. This won't happen again. Over the next week, he worked quietly, signing paperwork, calling lawyers, meeting child advocates. He covered Sarah's treatment, ensured she had a dedicated caseworker, and filed a formal complaint against the stepfather. He visited the shelter daily, bringing small things, books for the boys, a warm blanket for Sarah, a new set of crayons. One afternoon, he sat with the twins in the garden, teaching them how to make paper airplanes. Their laughter filled the air, a sound that felt like hope. Sarah watched from a window, her eyes soft, a faint smile breaking through. One morning, Lucas ran up, holding Turbo. We want you to have him again, he said. Keanu raised an eyebrow. He's yours now. He saved us, Lucas said. Maybe he can save someone else. Ethan nodded, his bruise fading but still there. Keanu crouched, taking the car. I'll keep him safe until it's time. They hugged him, a tight, wordless thank you, their small arms saying what words couldn't. Months passed. Sarah recovered fully, her cough gone, her strength returning. The boys started school, their backpacks new, their smiles brighter. Keanu stayed connected, calling to check in, sending small gifts, a soccer ball, a puzzle, a note saying he was proud of them. One afternoon, a letter arrived at his studio. Inside was a crayon drawing, Turbo, surrounded by 3 smiling stick figures. On the back, in crooked handwriting, "We have real beds now." Mom laughs again. "We're okay. Thank you for stopping." Keanu placed the letter beside Turbo on a shelf, his heart full. He sat in silence, letting the moment settle. Sometimes the smallest things carry the biggest weight. A folded paper, a toy car, a choice to cross the street. That night, Keanu wrote in his journal, "Sometimes all it takes to save a family is one person who doesn't look away."